Hello everyone, this is Numair Qureshi, and I want to welcome you to Unfolding Destiny, where we teach you how to build your life within the context of your true identity. Today's video is big problems and life decisions. So I want to contextualize this, I want to frame this up a bit. So when we go throughout life, there's a lot of things that we want to do, and sometimes it's just really difficult to find out in what order should we approach them, what should we do, what shouldn't we do, and I want to give you some perspective here. So let's talk about Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. So he came up with this theory. Well, he wrote a book called Creativity, in which he has this theoretical framework that consists of domains, fields, and an audience. And if you look at Michael Ellsberg's work, he kind of talks about that as well, but through a different lens. Let me kind of dissect for you what a domain, a field, and an audience is. So historically, whenever you wanted to influence society, you had to have access to the domain first. So domain is like a body of knowledge. Domain could be the domain of physics, domain of math, or literature. And there are subdomains, and there's so many domains now that you can kind of niche and focus on a specific part of a domain. So let's just say like you have the domain of physics. Maybe the subdomain would be theoretical physics, or maybe you want to do astrophysics. So there's many different ways to enter a domain, and there are subdomains. You kind of have to know what your specialty is, what you want to focus on, the work that you want to produce, in order to have access to the field and the audience. So think of it this way: the audience is what you want to get to. You want to influence the world with your findings. And so in order to get access to influencing the audience, you've got to have your ideas be entered into the field as well. But remember, as I mentioned, the domain has gatekeepers, and the only way to get access into the field, especially with academia, is to get through the gatekeepers, get access to the domain, and then finally have influence over the field. And so when you take a look at something like physics, once you get your PhD, well, the process towards that is you got to go to school, you got to get your degree, all that stuff. And then once you have like your bachelor's and your master's, and you apply for your PhD. Now that PhD does have gatekeepers. This is the review board. You got to present your case to the committee, and hopefully your physics paper becomes a dissertation that they approve of, and you get your doctorate. And that's basically the way it goes. Once you have access to the domain and you become credible because of your degree, because of your doctorate, if in this case, then you can influence the field of that domain. And then within that field, you can actually access the audience that's within that field, that's affected by that field, that cares about that field. This is how Einstein changed the world with his relativity papers and all of his other findings. That he got his PhD so that he had the credentials, so that then he could influence the field and then therefore have an audience. Now, when you look at the framework, I mean, I'll kind of draw it down here. It's almost like a triangle, right? But you've got this triangle here, and let's just call this the domain. And this is the field. And then there here, right over here, is the audience. And you've got little gatekeepers here, so boom, 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 gatekeepers. So historically, that's how you influenced the audiences, by having access to a field that you had to get through. You had to go through the domain of knowledge and master it to be able to access the field. There were a lot of hoops you had to, I guess, jump through. Now take a look at Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi has this framework in his book. When you look at Michael Ellsberg, he wrote this book called The Education of Millionaires, and he kind of reverses this whole framework. And his whole idea is that the days of the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker are long gone. That you don't necessarily have to go through this field of through the road of domains and gatekeepers. As a matter of fact, if you are an individual, and I'll put like a stick figure here, as an individual, you can actually now, through the power of the internet and blogging and social media and having up your own YouTube channel, you can have direct access to the audience and even the field for that matter. A lot of your findings can influence the field without you having to go to school, get your PhD, your doctorate, get past the gatekeepers and all that stuff. So there are so many ways to be successful today, And it can get pretty difficult to know what route should you take. Should I drop out of school and just become an entrepreneur? Should I go through academia and get my doctorate so that I have more credibility? And this is, I think, a problem that a lot of us wrestle with today. And I kind of want to just give you some perspective here. So yes, if you go with the Csikszentmihalyi framework, which by the way, I want to be clear, he's not talking about the necessity of you having to go through the specific domain. He's just talking about, his whole book is about creativity and how that's born. But he does press upon the idea that having influence over a field, most of the time you have to go through the gatekeepers to get mastery, attain mastery over a domain of knowledge. Michael Ellsberg is more of the notion that, no, I mean, you really just don't need school. You can kind of just influence the domain without having to go through that path. But now what I really want to highlight though is, as the title of this video asserts, big problems and life decisions. What my big aha moment was when you're trying to frame up what it is exactly that you want to do in your life and what approach you should take. How exactly do you know what your path is? How do you know what you want to ultimately do? And so we go through these phases where we're like, oh, well, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, because like, yeah, patience, and yeah, legalese, and I can teach people. And I think that's cool. It's good to kind of know what kind of influence you want. It's kind of good to know what kind of a reputation you want in society. But I think a better framework through which you can view the universe and make these decisions is really focusing on the big problem that you want to solve. So every decision that you make in life brings with it its own set of problems. And so the big problem is it's something monumental in your life. I feel like we all have a problem that we want to solve. And in life, you get rewarded to the degree of the size of the problem that you do solve, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say your problem-solving ability is mopping the floor, then you get paid accordingly. But if your problem-solving ability is to innovate and invent products, then you get paid accordingly. But how exactly do you know which path to take in life? Because you might be multi-talented, you might have a bunch of different ambitions and abilities and skill sets, and it's hard to really zero in on which way to go. And so what I want to assert is, look, just be present, be focused on the present moment, and really just figure out what the big problem you want to solve is. For Einstein, it was figuring out what is it like to ride on a beam of light. And that problem drove him to, he basically changed the world, right? But it took him a long time to do that. And because he kind of had this inkling, this fascination with light, it became clear to him, I would imagine, that, hey, maybe I should get my doctorate in physics so that I can have credibility in my work. And so in that case, it made sense. He started with the problem that he wanted to solve. And based on that problem, he was able to figure out what the best way to solve that problem would be and have credibility. So if the problem that he wanted to solve was, I don't know, how to cut a cucumber more efficiently, then if that was his big problem, if that was the thing that just drove him to like madness and made him stay up at night all night long just trying to figure out ways to perfect cucumber slicing, in that case, then all right, maybe he would not have needed his PhD in physics, because in that case all he needs to do is just produce something that I guess cuts cucumbers more efficiently. In that case, if that's the big problem that you want to solve, then you can kind of cut through a lot of the bureaucracy and all the red tape. You don't necessarily have to go through the gatekeeper, master a domain, have access to the field, and go to the audience. You don't have to go through that route. However, now if it's something to the effect of, let's say you want to have a mathematical theorem that you want to solve that you think could have far-reaching implications as far as influence the world, then, okay, if that's the problem you want to solve, you want to dedicate your life to mathematics, then it might make sense for you to actually go through that route of getting a master's or a PhD, just so that you have that credibility over the field through the gatekeepers and the review board and all that stuff. So, but keep in mind that every problem that you pursue brings with it its own set of problems. And the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to make choices that distract you from your big problem. So I want to give you an example, and this is huge. Let's say you want to, let's just use the Einstein example. So he wants to figure out relativity, and he wants to figure out what it is to ride in a beam of light. This is just occupying his mind. Okay, so then what he needs to do is he needs to sit with that problem, create space in his life where he can fully focus on that problem and make that his big mission in his life. Everything else is a distraction. So now if he's going out and partying, and if he's just like watching TV 24/7, and if he's just like, I don't know, just Netflix binging, this is a metaphor, this is an example here. If he's binging on Netflix, if he's not really, if he's, I don't know, pursuing women and relationships, if he's doing all these other things, which might seem like they're fun in the moment, realize that these other endeavors also bring with them a set of problems that are attached to them. The example that I like to use is, let's say you bought a broom. You just went out and you bought a broom. Great, you bought the broom. Now the fact that you bought that broom, that one decision that you made, created other problems. All right, you bought a broom. Well, now you actually need a dustpan, okay? Oh, well, now that you started sweeping and you started sweeping the house, you realize there are certain things that the broom can't access, like carpeting. So wait, now you need a vacuum cleaner. And so like that one decision sprung up all these other decisions. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, there are places that I can't reach with my vacuum. There's dust here. You know what? I need to get like a feather duster. And so like there's all these problems that arise because you made this one decision. So if you buy workout equipment, the same thing. You buy like a bench. Now you need to have a barbell, right? Just to work out with that. If you buy a barbell, well, you might need some dumbbells now. So just realize that we oversimplify the magnitude of the problem we're trying to solve. It took Einstein years to come to his solutions. And so what I want you to realize is that in life, we're presented with tons of different problems. And there's some of them that are big, some of them are small. You gotta find the problem that really drives you. And forget everything else. Do your best to minimize the inclusion of other things that might distract you. So I'll give you an example. Let's say now you're working towards your great masterpiece. You wanna spend all your time and energy creating this thing that you truly love and believe in. But then you're going out and you're gambling and you're doing things that are taking away from that path. And suddenly that gambling behavior suddenly becomes an addiction. And now you're far down that rabbit hole. It's so hard to escape it. And then you're in the gravity of that situation and suddenly you're taken off your path. And then what ends up happening is that that one problem that you got distracted by becomes your major problem. It creates this whole downward spiral of addictions and bad habits, and then suddenly you start bringing people into that sphere, and then everything gets built around the context of that specific problem, which is really just a side. It was a distraction more than anything else, but you made that your mission because you focused on it. So this applies to friends, romantic partnerships, and different types of relationships. So I mean, like whatever floats your boat, right? Monogamy, polyamory, polygamy, whatever you want to do. And if you want to have tons of friends over all the time, I mean, look, whatever makes you happy. But the thing is, realize that even with social relationships or romantic or whatever, everything in between, they come along. I mean, they bring with them their own set of problems. So if you're bringing in people into your life that are not actualized, if they don't have their own life together, if they have their own issues and you bring them in, then suddenly they're going to bring you down to their level, and they're not going to be happy with the fact that you're pursuing this other thing. They want their problem to be your problem, and suddenly they're bringing you into their world. And so what you thought was supposed to be fun, it's a fun night out, ends up becoming this whole, like, I don't know, disaster, because you're being taken off your path. The more that you can frame up your life through the lens that you're here to solve problems, but you're here to solve the most important problems that are pressing to you, that keep you up at night, it gives you a sense of relief, because once you start to focus on that problem, in a way it kind of aligns with your identity. Then you can bring other people into your life that complement your ability to solve that problem. So if you're looking to find like a potential partner in life, well, okay, if your problem that you want to solve is riding on a beam of light, and you want to find someone to kind of join you on that journey, then at least you know that this is the problem that I want to focus on, this is what I want to solve. Then with that person that you want to bring into your life, you pre-qualify them, and you just try to figure out, all right, is this person, I don't care how beautiful they are, how successful they are, how well known they are, all that stuff. By bringing this person into my life, and by the way, you can pretty much know within seconds, right? But bringing this person into my life, is that an additive to me being able to pursue this problem that I want to solve? Or is it going to subtract me? Is it going to take me away from that? And so this is a very important thing, because if you are taken away from the big problem that you want to solve, then you'll feel unfulfilled and your life is going to be a wreck. You're going to live below your potential. And so now I want you to think in terms of marketing versus rhetoric. This is huge, right? And this is something that took me a very long time to figure out. See, I want you to understand that the big problem that you have right now is only momentary. And that moment, I mean, that's a relative term. I mean, the moment may last you 10 years. It might take you 15 years to get to the root of this problem so that you can solve it. But once you solve that problem, more problems are going to arise. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I just mean in a sense that, all right, what is the next step on this journey? Okay, I published my theories of relativity. Great. Now what happens next? Can I build upon that foundation? What else can I do? And you kind of have to, it's hard to look too far out into the future because you don't know everything, but you do have an inkling of the kind of person that you want to be. For instance, you might want to be that person who's an academic, but also is making a lot of money, has his own or her own business. And how do you marry the two? How do you take the very problem that you solved and how do you segment it so that part of it you can teach to the world and the other part you can wrap up and you can package and market and make sales off of it? So there's different ways you have to approach this. And one of the things I want to let you know is that as you go through this road towards mastery and you start solving these complex problems, you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to attain a certain vocabulary, a certain vernacular. You're going to be able to express your thoughts in ways that the average person cannot. And it is your prerogative. It is your mission to figure out, and you're not going to know immediately. It's going to take you years to get there, but what parts of your journey can you just speak about conversationally, just as in like a classroom lecture, just like what I'm doing with you here today. Like, I'm teaching you a lot of things here, a lot of concepts, but I'm not selling you anything because it's not what I want to sell you. There are things that I am going to sell. There are things that I'm going to have people pay me for. And I know how to segment and separate all of that because I've gone through my own road of mastery and I've focused on my big problem, which was the whole concept of identity and self-transformation and transcendence. And now I know how to influence the world. And what I also know is that right now, as it stands, I need to get my ideas out there, which I'm doing right now in front of you on this camera in this video, and it's great. I don't necessarily need to have access to a gatekeeper and get into the domain and then to the field and audience. I can go directly to the audience, but it's also because I've gone through my past 13 years of mastery. I've gone through this road where I just had to figure things out, and now I finally have my topic in place. But keep in mind, this is more from a marketability standpoint, right? Now, when it comes to my rhetoric, when it comes to academia, when it comes to advancing public thought, then it might be necessary for me to actually go down the academic route, go through the gatekeepers, get access to the domain, and maybe get a PhD at some point and publish some papers so that I can influence the field from that level. Suddenly at that point, if I produce a paper on like quantum mechanics, but I also have a PhD in quantum mechanics, then I'm taken seriously. Otherwise, anything short of that, I'm just seen as a marketer or just like an armchair physicist and so forth, and rightfully so. You got to understand that there's a difference between having a influence over a field after having gone through the domain and through the gatekeepers, and there's a difference between creating something and inventing something and having direct access to the audience in that way. Take a look at someone like Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk is a genius, and he dropped out of, I think, his PhD program at Stanford after like 2 days in, and he just has like a bachelor's in physics, but he's not here to advance his rhetoric. I mean, you look at his tweets, and his tweets are funny. He's here to invent, and his whole mission is to change the world through his inventions. And so for him, you're not looking at him on stage debating other intellectuals, because that's not his mission. That's not the problem he wants to solve. He's not trying to publish papers to advance human thought. He's trying to publish papers to advance innovation and get more electric vehicles out there and getting more satellites out in outer space. Having said that, you have to know the problem that you want to solve. If you want to advance academic thought, then you might need to go through this process over here. If you want to be able to make money along the way, because if you look at like Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Robert Kiyosaki's work, and you realize that PhDs don't really make a lot of money in the sense of like someone who's owning a business, who owns a business might make a lot more. What if you want to marry the two? Well, then you have to know, where does your dissertation end and where does your marketing begin? And that's a very complex topic. It's something I do like to help people with on the side, and it's not something I'm going to be able to cover in this video, but I do want to let you know there are ways to arrive at that idea. But you need to think in terms of what your future advancement is, what you want out of that. And the best way to do that is to figure out what that big problem is that you want to solve. If you start with that problem, and everything else kind of unfolds along the way. Now, I want to leave you with one last nugget of thought here, which is life really is just, the advancement in life is the byproduct of you solving problems. And if you can just solve one problem and make that your full mission, then everything else just, you can push off into the future. So right now, I'm solving the problem of identity and self-transformation through my own program. Mixotype is a company that I've started, and it helps you discover your own true identity and build life within the context of your identity. And there's a marketability component behind it. We've also got like research done behind it to support it. And right now, my whole thing is to get the idea out there to create like economic gains from promoting that idea and helping people realize their own potential and all that. However, one day in the future, if I want to advance academic thought, if I want to make Mixotype not just like a marketing ploy, but I want it to be taken seriously from an academic standpoint, then I might have to go down the route of getting like a PhD or something. And it's too early to tell. I don't know. I'm not quite there yet. That's not a problem that I'm here to wrestle with or to pursue. Because think about it. If I look at it from that perspective, if you look into the future, oh, well, the problem I want to solve is I want to get on stage and have debates with people like Jordan Peterson, and I want to have academic discourse. Well, then, if that's the problem I want to solve, then how do I get there? Well, I might need to get like a PhD just to even be able to stand on the same stage. But right now, that's not the problem I want to solve. See, there is the academic and then there's the entrepreneur. And in this world, usually it's one or the other. You really can't be both. I kind of want to be both. I want to be the academic and the entrepreneur. But in order to do that, I've got to create a foundation for my enterprise. And right now, this is the specific problem that I'm solving. And so for that, the best that I can do is, while I wrestle with this problem and try to solve the problem of promoting my ideas through the lens of entrepreneurship and having people take part of that world, as long as I'm focusing on that, then I got to minimize all the other distractions outside of that. And I got to make sure that as I'm evaluating people and bringing them into my life, I got to make sure that this person is an additive to my overall mission, and they're not going to take me away from that problem. They're not going to make their problem my problem. And so that's how you create win-win situations, that the person or the people that you bring into your life, are they on their own mission? Do they know what the problems are that they want to solve? And maybe you can solve them together, but you cannot delineate yourselves or each other from your own purpose, from your own path. Notice I'm talking about framing your life up through the lens of problems, not specific. Like I said the word purpose just in passing, but I'm not saying that you need to find your life purpose. I mean, that's kind of like an external thing. But there are problems that you're drawn to solving, and I think through that you'll find meaning. So I leave you off with this, right? So if, let's say, you wanted to become a doctor. Why do you want to become a doctor? Is it for the authority? Is it for the reputation? Is it because you want to help people? I mean, these are all great things. Does it pay? All right, well, now let's reframe this as, what is the problem you want to solve? Okay, and does being a doctor help you directly solve that problem? So if you want to solve the problem of getting a spaceship into outer space, does becoming a medical doctor give you the ability to directly solve that problem. Not really, right? So you got to really find what it is that you're passionate about, the things that keep you up at night. Solve those problems, solve the biggest versions of those problems, and then you'll find the route through which you can express yourself. All right, thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoy this content, please let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe, share this with your friends and family. And if you have any questions, you know where to reach me. My Instagram is numair.co and Unfolding Destiny. You can find me there, and all right, thank you so much.